Welcome back to the Arcadian podcast. Today is Monday, June 17th, 2019, and this is episode number 20. I am Matt Franceschi, and joining me today I have Adam Wolf, Ben Bachman, and Dave Mead. Trending news today, we're a little bit late to this actually, but I really want to hit on the Vox Adpocalypse. And there was an article recently written that stated that only 17% of E3 games are non-violent. And I'd really like to dive into that story as well. But the main topic today is something that I think is one of the main ideas and conversations that we usually get into whenever we're talking about like really anything. It almost always comes up, and this is the topic of games evolving or devolving as a product, whichever way you want to look at it, from the past to the current state. And what I mean by that is a debate of player experience versus player engagement, and how companies make games and how they try to keep you engaged with the product that you're buying. So that's like, instead of giving you a really good story or, you know, a really, really good, unforgettable in-game experience, instead they rely on a daily login reward or, you know, new skins monthly to keep you engaged and coming back. Or that, you know, games as a service model where, you know, they're constantly updating with new features instead of just giving you everything at once. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. Like I said, we've talked about it before here and there, but I think it's like one of the main issues that the industry is facing right now. And I'd really just love to hear your thoughts on the state of the industry and games.
So I guess I have something that kind of hits home to me recently on this topic, and it's not even with like one of those free to play kind of games with, you know, the loot boxes, the daily log and that kind of thing, but it's even, I feel like this kind of mentality is really crept into all facets of gaming. Really no genre safe at this point. Total War 3 Kingdoms, I just got that recently, put a fair amount of hours into it. And you know, sadly, I felt a similar experience with Warhammer and Warhammer 2, that you kind of get into this game and it feels like there's a lot there. And you know, X amount of hours in, when I'm like 20, 30 hours in, it just feels like it's still so empty. And I know what they're doing with it because they did it with Warhammer 2 and Warhammer. They're gonna just creep out with the DLC and the, you know, the additional purchases. I mean, there's already, I want to say it had to have been pretty close to like day one DLC, that Yellow Turban Rebellion. You're already paying an extra $9 on top of a $60 game, and all it is, you know, 3 additional factions. And I felt like, you know, this game in general, I'm sure you guys are semi familiar with like Dynasty Warriors and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
there's a lot of, you know, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. There's a lot of story to be had there,
Mm.
and they don't take advantage of any of it. And I think that you're just gonna only be able to, you know, get the full game, you know, 6 months to a year from now, when they finally release all the factions you can play as and the expansion and the actual story elements to it and things like that.
Yeah, that we were talking about that extensively when I was up visiting Pennsylvania, Wolf, and I did a little bit of research on it because I was interested and I wanted to potentially look into getting it. And you know, it seems like it's they just put this out because they can pull from the old fanboys of the romance games. They can pull from the Dynasty Warriors fans, and and obviously there's a huge fan base for the Total War. So it's like it's like the three-pronged attack here, man. Like it's like that's all they had to do essentially. Like this is how easy it is for developers now. All they have to do is just put these, you know, categories together and use the nostalgia of these games, and people are gonna buy the DLC like you're talking about. The base game is what it's you would say mediocre, maybe even a little bit less than that.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're taking all of these things from these games, and like what I was starting to get a little bit excited when you were telling me all the similarities, the cross between the romance and what they did with this. And then as you got into the details of it, it was like, but it wasn't done like exceptionally. You know, it was kind of just like they threw it in there because they knew that that's what the romance fans wanted. You know,
Right.
like it's the depth of it is just it's not there. From everything that I've seen, initially it was just fandom. All the videos, all the noise that I was hearing was just strictly fanboys going nuts, like it's the greatest. But then, like when you actually get into the fine details, it's not. It isn't.
Right. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, where there really doesn't need to be any like upfront longevity on the game, or it doesn't even have to be done well. As long as like you can hit, a few key points. Like in this case, it was a lot of nostalgia and a lot of people that are familiar with the story and want a game that just sounds perfect. The Total War series with this kind of like story and gameplay, and it's like a perfect marriage. Like they're just gonna buy it, and that's all that matters.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think we saw that at E3. And this is actually like what triggered me wanting to have this conversation. It was like it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, man, we have to like talk about this again because it's so clear right now after seeing 250 games announced like through the whole show, or like 243 I think is like the final count. Maybe there were like 30 new games that I hadn't seen the titles before, that weren't part of a previous franchise. And that's all well and good, and it's very cool to a certain extent, but at the same time you need to stop relying on what you did in the past and coming out with these shallow products and reusing these features and reusing these characters and reusing these stories that everybody already knows, and start coming out with something new. I feel like the fan base is almost split, but unfortunately I think that it's split very much in the favor of everybody is just going to love and buy these products no matter what. It might be like 85 to 15%, and I think that's why you're still getting these shallow products with these very common franchise tags and names, is because people are going to still buy them.
Right. You kind of want to like hold on to it, right? Like in the case, I mean, how many Zelda games have there been? And nothing against them; they've made a lot of really great games, but people are obviously going to keep buying those in fear that if you don't keep buying them, maybe they're just going to stop making them one day, that kind of thing, or just kind of like hanging on to these.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Dynasty Warriors, there have been terrible games for the last few years, for like 10 years, but I bought like 2 or 3 of them still. It's just like you just keep hanging on, and it's
Yeah.
not good for anybody.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Oh, go
just
ahead,
to
David.
chime in a little bit, I think a big problem is too, especially with games like WoW and you know what I mean? Games that stay alive and like just keep building on its old iterations and like it sticks around. Like for me, especially WoW wise, like I don't want to quit because like my character progression is like on that account and it has been there since the game started like 15 years ago. So it's really hard. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you already have such a sunk cost into it. It feels really bad to like give it all up, even if you're not having fun.
Well, I'd actually really
Yeah.
like to talk about WoW, Dave, because I think that it's something that we've talked about in the past, but it's like the perfect data point and game to look at through time, since it's existed for such a long time and it's still like fairly the same game. I know that there's expansions and there's obviously new features and new raids and things, but for the most part it's pretty similar to classic, I would say, and like the theme of the game and like what you do. But I think that I would argue that the game is very, very different in the way that the game keeps you engaged and gets you to keep playing versus how it did that in the past.
Right.
And I think that that's what the stuff like the Azerite and leather and leveling up your armor. I mean, you can speak to it, Dave, better than I can, but I think that it's like the perfect case for what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, WoW's definitely a good example of just like things have definitely changed, but like the big things that haven't changed are like the questing system and stuff. You know what I mean? Like when you quest, it's like go kill 10 of these, go pick up 5 of these. And like
Mhm.
if there's one thing that absolutely gets incredibly stale, it's stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? It's the same mundane. Like that's just how WoW has always been. Like sure, there's other quests that are a little more interesting, but far and few, between compared
Yeah.
to pick this up, kill this, kill 10 of these,
Yeah.
and like it's
Well,
just all in that way. And I don't know what they do to like get rid of that because
yeah.
it's just like that's like a core of the game, and like we like as players we've kind of outgrown that and expect more. But like in classic, it was okay because it was new and exciting. But like new and exciting only lasts for so long, right?
Yeah,
in a
and I
way.
mean, they've implemented all these things, the daily login rewards and in the daily quests, or the rep grinding quests that you have to log in daily, or is it weekly sometimes with some of them, or however so many days. And all these things have been implemented, and they've done it for so long. I mean, it's been around for so long that it just doesn't seem like they will ever take that out of um, World of Warcraft as it is now. But that's what I mean. That's ultimately why we see Classic coming back, I think, is because, well, one, first, most importantly, they're going to make money off of it, but they know they're going to make money off of it because they have this thing that's, seen the ups and downs rather than just strictly success over and over again.
Right. I know Dave was saying like about like the questing and things like that. They're kind of essential to any RPG, and you're not going to fall out of those tropes in the game, or it just won't essentially be an MMORPG anymore if you start cutting that stuff out. But I feel like I don't know, like the motive behind, like why things are in the game now
Hmm.
for World of Warcraft, it just feels completely different than it used to in Classic. And I feel like that's,
Exactly.
it's not like it was any more fun to go kill like, 10 boars in Classic as it is, compared to killing 10 anything in BFA at the moment. But it, how do I want to say this? It was almost like now everything just seems so geared towards, like we keep saying, what's going to bring them back kind
Hmm.
of thing.
Mm.
Like what kind of gimmicky
Yeah.
little process can we throw in here to make sure that they log in tomorrow, the next day,
It,
the day after that.
yeah,
But like
it's
back then, it was everyone kind of made their own fun. They didn't have these systems in place to draw you back. It was, and that's why it wasn't for everybody. And that's why a lot of people say that it was probably, it wasn't as popular back then as it was during like Wrath of the Lich King and things like that. But it made for a good experience if you enjoy that kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, games in the.
I,
Go ahead, Ben.
I think that just with anything, we have all these examples with Star Wars and Game of Thrones, and a lot of people argue the last season, the last two seasons, I say since season 5 and above. Well, one of the main things that I like to point out is when you see that these, and you have to give these people credit, because it is really hard to take someone else's story and basically interpret it in a way that's true to the origin of the story, and not fuck it up. But the fact of the matter is, once they get away from the origin, and it's in my opinion, it's the same thing with these games that have rich lore and really good stories and everything, is once you get to a certain point, it just goes downhill, story wise, engagement wise, like all of these things. And like, I think that we have to recognize this. We're doing with books, it was different. With word of mouth things, like a long time ago, is different. But now that we have these different sources of entertainment and media, I think we're finding out that what these really rich stories that come directly from one person, or maybe two people who develop these really engaging rich stories, like, it's really hard to cross those over in other forms of media and entertainment. And I think you really have to have a balanced, nuanced approach that is it takes so much in order to keep it once you reach a certain point
Uh,
of telling the story.
I see what you're saying, and I think that it's true, and it's a really good point. But I also think that there is a certain laziness that's come about
Mm.
in the industry that isn't just, it's not just because it's hard to do. It's also because I think that they've found another way to bring you in, and that's with money and rewards and cosmetics and things like that, which you
Yeah.
see everywhere now, right? It's like
Mhm.
inescapable. I mean, not every single game, but I would say every year more and more games percentage wise in the industry have those features.
Yeah.
And I think they have
And-
it for a reason, because in the past you couldn't rely on those features to bring people in. You had to rely on the product that you put out on day one,
Exactly.
and it had to be good, and you had to bring something different to the table, something that gave the player a different experience than what they've seen in the past. And that's
Right.
why games were getting so good all the time. Now they know that they can give you an average product with a similar title and a similar character to what you've seen. It's got an okay story. It's not that great, you know. You've seen the story before. It's more of the same, but they can also keep you engaged with the daily logins. They can give you a new skin for $10, and you know the daily logins are cool. Like, look at a game like Hearthstone. You know, the daily logins are nice because you get some gold to buy packs, and the packs are expensive. So on the one hand, if you're playing every day anyway, it's a nice feature for you because you get some free cards. But I think to Adam's point, what he said before, it's the motive of why that's there. It's not there to help you. It's there to keep you coming in every day and playing their game and keeping the player base. And I think that that's the real problem here, is that it's there strictly to make you log in and play their game. It's not there to help you get cards. Right. It's there to make money and keep you logged in.
Exactly. And the thing that I was trying to get at that I didn't explain very well was, as we switch to these different forms of media, the team gets larger, right? Because there's money to be made. In order for this to work, there has to be a lot of heads, you know, a lot of minds working together in order to make this work. So I think that, like, once that happens, there's more degradation. And then we have thrown on top of that, it's the money, where they're beholden to people to make money and to make money for themselves. So they have to implement these, you know, these things that we point out as, you know, just not very good for the gamer and not very good for the experience and the story. And when you start going down the list, you're like, well, why the hell are they doing this shit? You know what I mean? They're doing it for the money. They're doing it for growth. They're doing it for longevity, and they're doing it for business. They're not doing it for the passion that they get from creating these stories and getting the feedback from people saying, wow, man, that really changed my life. All this nostalgia, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really turning into this thing where, and I don't know, who knows if it's going to stop, because it's such a big machine now that it doesn't really matter. You know, a good story-based game is an exception.
Well, it's the moving. I think it's not the same product. You used to buy an art form packaged into a video game, where now you buy, at least from the big studios, I would say indie games are separate from this, but now you buy a digital monetized product, a game as a service that's wrapped up with a recurring revenue model that satisfies investors and keeps cash flow coming in monthly to support the business. I mean, that's exactly what it's there for. It's the same thing that tech companies do with software as a service. They took it straight from tech. And I mean, I know why they did it. I mean, tech's very successful, and I mean, they've been successful with it too, but it's just, I think, you know, we had the conversation a while ago about, like, us maybe being too old and not liking video games as much. And I think there might be some cadence to that. But really, these products are not the same products that we bought 15 years ago. At least not a lot of the time. I mean, you get some titles, you get The Witcher and you get Divinity, but for the most part, you're from the big studios, you are not getting the same thing.
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to say that, you know, I feel like we kind of harp and kind of beat on the developers of video games. And, you know, in some cases, maybe they deserve a little bit of criticism, but you know, everything that you guys were speaking to there, as far as like the profit, the bottom line of these companies, is that, you know, I think all these developers, they're all working really hard, but they can't I can't see them being allowed to actually express themselves creatively in this kind of you know, market, at least in the bigger studios and things like that. I mean, nobody is probably allowed to take any risks. It's got to look good on paper. It's got to look good in the pitch to investors. But the only guy I could think of that's doing anything creative that's big is like Hideo Kojima. And he's like the only one that's allowed to do like crazy shit and make a video game out of it.
Yeah.
Everybody else.
I mean, just that's a really good point. And, like, let's think about this. People who have created arts and other media forms, if it's paintings or music or, you know, et cetera, when they are given the freedom to do their work and express themselves in the perfect manner that's true to themselves, and not have to worry about deadlines or being beholden to stockholders. And it's like the trickle down effect where it's like, yeah, the CEO is telling this dude this, and then it goes down, and then it finally hits the like developers or the the engineers, and they're like, okay, well, we got to get it done. So how many ideas, how much like detail do you lose when you are unable to express yourself, through your art, through your passion, when you are beholden to the machine? You know what I mean? That's what it is, really. It's
I agree with you
Yeah, and
100%.
everybody's looking for that Fortnite. So even if you do come up with a great idea for a game, I think that any CEO or CFO is going to say, okay, that's a great pitch. This sounds really good, but how are we going to monetize this monthly? And how are you going to bring in revenue monthly instead of just having this be $60? And how are we going to satisfy investors with that? And where's the cash flow going to come from? And those are all things that they definitely ask nowadays. Like the industry is just too damn big. And that's probably the issue, is that games just were too much fun, and the art form was actually so good that everybody wanted to play them. I mean, for sure, us included. But now it's just you see this. I don't even know what you want to call it. It's like I said, this evolution or devolution of a product, whatever you want to say. But it's really the transformation of the product into something that's not the same. Not the same as it was.
We were talking about it a little for the podcast. The imagery that comes to mind is like this big, build up, magnificent thing, and now the crows of the capitalist. I mean, it's necessary for things to grow, but at this point, now they're just eating at this huge thing that we've built up and have made, and
What's
now
left of it?
yeah, exactly. And it's like, what's gonna happen when you've had your fill? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
are we just gonna be so brainwashed into playing video games? Is everyone just gonna be? That seems like that's the agenda, is to get everybody playing, make it socially acceptable, and to everyone, old people, young people, your parents, et
Well,
cetera, et
my
cetera.
parents will never play, but they'll never get them. But I think it's what Dave always speaks to. Not to like go completely off topic from what you were saying, Ben, but it's even like with these subscription services. It's not only do you have to have the game as a service that you update all the time with new skins monthly that people are buying and you're raking in money, but you're also going to have these subscription services where everybody's got to pay $15 to play your games and get access to your older games. And it's like, where does it end? How much money can the consumer pay out for these products? I mean, it doesn't add up.
Well, they've done like a little bit of trickery. What they've done is they're saying, well, here's the subscription. You don't have to pay the 60 bones. It's changed, but it's gimmicky, and the reality is like they're still getting more money from you, much, 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 much more money.
Oh yeah.
But it's a trick, because all it is a number. You see the number, $9 a month. Okay, that's less than 60. Like the normal people, they want to play it. They don't give a shit. Like they're gonna do it. They're gonna do the subscription, and they may even have good intentions to say, well, I'll do it for 3 months, and then it'll be half of what I used to pay for video games 10 5-10 years ago. So it's devious, and my because it's
Well, I like that you guys brought up the subscription based thing, and I feel like Ben's always talking about I guess the how similar the different forms of media are and stuff like that. And I think that video games, at least that video game market, almost seems like they're trying to dominate, all entertainment, right? Like with that
Mhm.
subscription base, like they're kind of like creeping in on like what Netflix does now, and like what cable television has done for years. Like think how much, I'm sure you've heard, all your life, how much everybody's always paying for cable TV and internet, like what like 180 200 plus dollars a month to get all your channels and internet and everything. So people have the money to pour into like these subscription based uh you know video game providers, whether it be Stadia, whoever else is going to be giving you the streaming of the video games. But you tag on a a price tag of what, $10, $15 a month, it doesn't look as bad if you're gonna say like, well, I don't watch television anyways. I'm just gonna cut that out of the equation. We'll just keep going with the
Yeah.
video games.
Yeah, I'll play my MMOs. You know what I mean? That somebody could be like that. They'll be like, "Oh, well, let me turn off the cable. I'll play my MMOs. They're cheaper."
Right.
You know, it's just like they've forced it. These industries have forced it upon us, and it's funny that you say that, Wolf, because I remember my fucking parents talking about this when I was younger. It's like, oh, we got the cable, we got the internet. It's like, and there's no choice, you have to have it. It's like,
Right. Is it
what
going
are
to
you
get to that?
talking
It's going to be
about?
like we're going to have the
Yeah.
subscription to
Or
Stadia or
even,
something like
even
that.
the telephone bill, or the whole shebang, it all wrapped in the newspaper. How many pounds it is for the newspaper?
But you're right. Like it's all entertainment when it's all said and done. I mean, you can say like you're getting your news and things like that too. But how much news do you think you could actually find on the television and the newspaper? And it's not just for big headlines, things like that. Not to get like off topic, but
Mm.
there's sensationalism and everything. And I think
Yep.
video games are kind of suffering from that right now too. We get that huge hype up to any video game that's coming out. And then you get this release and you're all excited to play it, like in my case with like Total War 3 Kingdoms. And like, man, it's so shiny and it looks great for the first few hours. And then you start like digging under the surface there a little bit. And there really isn't that much game. And you spent $60 on this thing. But there's that DLC that's going to add a little bit more enjoyment to it. Like, hey, like maybe you'll have more fun playing as these three guys than you were playing as the other 9, or however they're gonna try gift wrapping it to you.
Rainbow Six Siege, we're coming out with the new guys. Just you better get back on.
Right.
For the fifth year in a row.
It's just such a bad thing for the industry. And I feel like people are waking up to it a little bit more, but I mean, definitely not quickly enough, and definitely not enough people. And I feel like the ramifications of this are going to be felt like 10 years down the road, and everybody's like going to wake up one day and you're going to be paying for like 8 different subscription services to play your games, and like you're not going to have any hardware anymore, and the games aren't going to be any good, and you have to pay for like all these things in game and all this DLC to keep the content coming, and everybody's going to be like, oh, like what the fuck happened? And then like the people that saw it coming are gonna be like, well, like you just bought these shitty products for the last 10 years, like what did you think was gonna happen?
Yeah, when you're at fucking E3
mean,
screaming your fucking face off
when you got your Bethesda shirts on and you're all about Todd Howard, yeah, like what did you think was gonna happen? I mean, it's very clear. I mean, the path is, it's crystal clear. I mean, they're showing you what they want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't hide it. I mean, they push as much as they can in, and then people get a little bit mad and they back off, and then they do it again and they put more in, and then everybody's like, oh, whoa, you can't do that. And it's just going to keep, every 2 years, it's just going to keep going through the same cycle until there's nothing left.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk solutions here. I mean, what is there?
Yeah, everybody has to stop buying their shit.
Yes, yes. I mean, so I mean, yeah, of course, that's the obvious thing. But how do we get to that point? Through communication, through what do we have to set up in order to get this across to people, to get like-minded people to start speaking about it, and articulating it to other people who may like have this feeling that it's happening, but they like can't put it together, or they're too deep in video games that they don't want to admit it, or
I have one solution, I feel like, and I feel like it might be like the least
It's not
thought of one.
It's not the Riot SWAT team again, is it?
No, it's not.
well, larger scale,
it could be revamped. We could revisit that and just make a few tweaks.
Just make an army, I guess. Like
right. I'm not endorsed by like the Epic Game Store, and I don't own anything from them. But when I look at, I know we talked about this in the past, but they're split, what kind of cut they're taking compared to Steam, and how obsessed everybody is with Steam, in that 70-30 at Steam. What was it, 92-8 at Epic?
I think 88-12, I think.
88-12, is that what it was? I think that's a huge way to take the pressure off the gaming studios, is to, maybe get away from Steam a little bit and be more receptive to. It doesn't have to be the Epic Store, but I seriously think. I mean, Steam's obviously the biggest platform, and anybody selling there is definitely getting gouged. I mean, 30% of everything. I mean, they're not doing anything for you. I mean, other than that advertisement you get from being on the store, the slightly easier accessibility, I guess. But I feel like that's one
Hmm.
probably really underestimated avenue that people could probably start looking
Just
into.
just pull the pressure off of developers in some way in order to stop the deadline, stop saying, we need this done at this juncture and this game has to
Right.
be out at
You
this
know,
point.
I think that's a really good idea, Adam. I think you're right, because that would increase the quality if they didn't have to worry about putting those microtransactions in. But I think another thing you could see is similar to how tech companies operate today is you have an influx of private equity investors and like angel investors that come in and they'll finance your game or they'll finance your company for you, and they'll say, okay, what's your idea, let's hear the pitch, and they'll give you $5 million.
Well, that sounds like indie stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but I mean,
Well, I like that.
It
That
is,
sounds-
but I mean, you could see private equity firms like these. This isn't like one person, right? These are people that have a lot of capital to invest not only in companies, but I could see them doing it in games, where instead of like relying on EA to make this huge game, you have a team of devs that come up with it. They have a bare bones product, and you have a PE firm come in and. Although private equity firms are very greedy as well, so I don't know if they're the best.
Yeah, so
But I'm just saying
I
a fusion of an influx of private funds into the equation rather than just like relying on these big studios to handle everything.
Yeah, I get it, but what's the pitch? I mean, so the pitch from our perspective is what's happening is we're not getting quality games that are good experiences and have good stories and everything, but like what people are still looking to make money. You know what I mean? That's like that's that's what the evolution of this has been. Is it's just something turned into make money. So like what in the name of art, in the name of passion for video games, like what's the pitch here? Like I don't see it working.
As far as
I was just saying to like ease the burden of not having cash flow up front and not having to
Right.
rely on those
Okay.
transactions. But I mean, people are going to want to make the money anyway, so
Yeah.
Yeah, that's asking a lot. I feel like, do you really want to go up against those titans like EA and
exactly.
Bethesda and stuff like that? Especially, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it does happen. I'm sure it has happened in the past, but
Well, the way that I kind of thought about it was, it's going to get huge. That there's going to be a large, everybody's going to be playing video games eventually. So what happens then? Then I think there is potential after. So this is like a growth period, right? In order for it to grow and for them to make it acceptable, they have to have money. They have to have success, correct? In order to get it on the scale that they want to. So then I'm hoping, I don't want to continue to see this, but I think it's inevitable. But then I'm hoping after that growth period and everyone's playing and there's so much money and it's our new no more TV. It's the top entertainment in media. Well, then there's just naturally these good games are good with good stories and people who are passionate about it, and there's always going to be the will for people who are passionate about this, that like to make stories and like to make really good games. It's I feel like after the growth period, I'm just rambling on now, but after the growth period, it'll naturally come back to where there'll be good games because that's what people are going to be looking for.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I think
and it's not going to be the perpetual force pushing against it anymore to make the growth happen.
it just depends on how successful they are. And unfortunately, I mean, I hate to be like the bearer of bad news, but like when things get too big and too popular, there's so many people that like enter that arena and that fandom that don't really know like what the quality product is or was, that they'll take anything. Like
Exactly.
look at Avengers, look at Game of Thrones, look at Disney, like the Star Wars franchise. Like I mean, I would argue that like you could see a major quality diminish in all of those, and they're all enormous fan bases. But it doesn't matter because everybody watched it or consumed the entertainment anyway because they had to see it, and like most of the fan base just tweeted about how much they loved it at the end of the day. You know, you might have had 10% of the fan base that was pissed, but if you get 90% of, 100 million people, does it really matter if you pissed off 10%? I mean, it doesn't. So I don't know how you combat it unless like everybody just stops buying the stuff. It's like the only way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it. Somebody has to stop buying. We all have to stop buying this shit, or
Everyone's
at
so
least stop buying.
habitualized now about it, man.
Exactly. Yes, habit. Yep.
I mean, we have friends that do it all the time. They just buy the next shooter, like whatever it is. Everyone's playing Battalion. It's like, what the fuck? This game
Oh yeah.
doesn't like graphically, and I don't want to harp on graphics. I'm not about that. I don't think any of us really are. That isn't what makes a good game, but it just kind of looks like a low effort game, to be honest. And I don't get it. Everyone just keeps jumping to the next thing though, because what like they pay Shroud to play it or something, and that's all it matters. What influencer you got to?
It's just how good the marketing is. Yeah.
So that is the problem. Is everyone's just buying out of habit. What is forcing them? What is forcing their hands in this? Is it because they want to be a part of a group of people who are playing the game? I mean, half of it I think is just like, it's in my Steam, I got it there, now you can show it's like this thing, I see on Twitter, the Switch people, and I mean, Switch has a lot of good games. I don't blame them for putting the games that they're playing, because there's a lot of good games for Switch, but they always have their Switch catalog showing on Twitter and stuff, like they're like showing off. It's like,
yeah.
Is it really?
I mean, I think you're probably right. I think it's like the culture of having to seem like you know what you're doing, to be because you want to be accepted by the rest of what everybody else is doing. Like it's like, when a new phone comes out, like you want to be the one to have the new phone. Mm-hmm. When the new Zelda game comes out, like you have to have the new Zelda game because you have to like tweet about it and tell your friends that you have it, and you have to say how good it, like you can't just own it. You have to say that it's like that it like changed your life and that it's like the best game that you played in your life as well. And I think that, I mean, that's just like human nature, I think, because you want to be accepted by like your peers, and if everybody's reading that Zelda's great and Zelda's coming out and then you get it, what are you going to say? Zelda stinks? Some people might, but I think most people are going to say, well, no, this is great.
Yeah. We've did that. It's the same thing as when we were little kids.
I mean, it's like sixth
with
grade
Pokemon
shit.
cards.
Yeah, right.
You don't have this? Oh shit, my mom's gonna take me to go buy fucking 30 packs of Pokemon cards because I want Charizard or whatever the hell. It's like, yeah, dude, it's we're still little children in that way, but we have to, as a community, not a community, as people who are buying products and shit, like we have to like grow up and buy quality over like those kind of things that we were just discussing. It's like, but choose, make a decision that's based off of. But I guess people just don't think that deeply. I suppose about it.
I don't even know if it's. I wouldn't even put all the blame on people. I don't think the average person is set up, in a good situation to make an informed decision on whatever they're going to be buying, because the common theme to all these releases, and just because it's fresh in my head, like this Three Kingdoms thing, I was looking at the reviews after I played it, and they're all like 10 out of 10, like Metacritic, from all the apparently reputable review companies and stuff. Like everybody's saying like how great this game is and things like that, and they get their hands on it beforehand. So you get all this hype build up. We're giving the game out selectively to XYZ. They reviewed it. They all said it's the best game they've ever played. Yeah. And then you get
Kotaku, Polygon, and IGN.
Right. They've never played a better game in their life, and then you and all your friends get excited, and you can't be the one that's like left out. Whether it's people you even know, or like you're involved in that community on Twitter or on YouTube or on Twitch, like you can't be the one that's left out, and everyone's impulse straight to buying it, whether it was good or not.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying with we don't want to put too much emphasis on the game, the person who's the buyer, because they're kind of set up to make these decisions. It's just
Right.
thrown at them. Um, but that's the way that we're going to fix it, in my opinion, because on the other side of things, who are the people who are, if you want to say manipulation, who are doing the devious behavior in order to make these people addicted or make them feel like they need to be a part of these groups of people who have these products, or in order to combat that, you have to educate, you have to give the people knowledge that they still have power, and they still can put their money where their mouth is, and they can help make decisions, but just there needs to be broader communication between people, and not the main source of information be the people that you're talking about. That
Well,
can't be the main source of information, but it will be. But in order to fix it, in my opinion, it can't be. We
that's
have to figure out other ways, building up systems in order to get people to realize that, you know, they don't it sounds funny, like we're talking we're talking about alcohol or
Well,
cigarettes or
well, I mean,
something,
it is to a certain
but
extent, but I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even know that like I'd even want to say that the practice of like this is like devious or anything, or it's like underhanded. It's just that they're just really, really big companies that need to make a lot of money, and they found a way to make money, and they've tried it, and it works, and people pay for it. Like, I mean, I would do it too. Like, we put this podcast out for free, obviously, but like, if I could charge a viewer $100 per episode to watch it, and people would pay it, I mean, I would gladly put that window on there. Like, I'm not stupid.
Yeah. Well,
But that's
this
just what
is
it is. I mean, that's just
and,
what it
and
is.
Matt, I don't want to go far with you, because me and Wolf have gone in this fucking conversation before.
Well, I'm
I'm
just
saying that
saying,
it
like,
is devious because you are putting you're benefiting in an extreme way, and you're taking, now you're saying, well, I'm not taking
yeah,
advantage
but
of them. They want the product. Well,
well,
no, that's not fucking
it's
fair.
well,
It's not
it's
fair, and
yeah, but
it's simple.
yeah, but it's both. You have to put responsibility on the individual too. I
Yes,
mean, the
that's what I'm trying
individual
to
and the
say.
consumer
Yes,
has to be smart enough to say
exactly.
this
That's what I'm
isn't a
talking
good
about.
product.
Educate.
But I mean that's why you can't just say that it's just devious. It is a little bit, but there has to be a
It,
responsibility on the
it, it,
individual
it,
to say
it,
no.
it is more than a little bit. I think that um it matter. I mean, there's different degrees. You know what I mean? Like the Total War franchise. I think that's pretty fucking bad
Yeah, or
because
like
they
the
just
or the
know.
PUBG crates and keys.
Yeah, and the key, that fucking garbage, and you're buying like tank
Mm.
tops and shit. It's like, or like
Mhm.
stupid ass hats and stuff. It's
Hey,
like,
well,
what the
before we get too far off topic from it, I like what you were saying, Ben, about like we have to have some kind of like informed. You were saying almost like a community and a way to make sure that people are put in the most advantageous
yeah,
position to make good decisions about what they're spending their money on when sometimes it's just total garbage. And granted, there's refunds and things like that, but uh, we look to responsible journalism, I guess, and
mm,
critics and game reviewers that you can rely on, and they're kind of few and far between anymore. There's not really anybody reputable that anymore that comes to mind. It feels like anybody can be bought out nowadays, but I feel like at the moment the mouthpiece of the community is kind of like those Twitch streamers, the
mm,
people that are like paid influencers to do whatever game comes next, because not all of them, I mean, they take the money, but sometimes they do give like an honest review of the game. I've seen people play some pretty ridiculous stuff, and they kind of just come out and flat out say like, this isn't good.
yeah,
This isn't, don't waste your time on this. And people can get a pretty good idea of that. And I feel like a lot of responsibility, unfortunately, is probably going to have to fall on these people, because I mean, we know them the best, right? They build the communities. You've been spending the most time like listening to them. You probably understand the perspectives much better than the writers at, just to name one, Kotaku or anything like
yeah.
that. They have a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility. Their words carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, and it doesn't. The approach could be very complex. It doesn't just have to be one thing. That's a really good idea, and that would reach so many people. So of course, that's is just trying to make trying to make somehow incentivize the see now I'm thinking in the devious way. But somehow incentivize without money, perhaps, I don't know, but it's probably gonna have to be through money in some way, but incentivize good, honest game journalism that gets down to the crux of how, good games are and if they're worth your money and if you should be given the developer grief, if they should be under your sites for not buying their games or maybe chilling out on buying their games until they are practicing better um and it's got to be game journalism. And like you said, maybe they could do the streamers. There's YouTubers, there is good YouTubers out there that get I've noticed that they sometimes go astray and they take things personally, and then they go down and do stupid shit too, and then they're part of the political thing, and it's like it's so hard to keep a level head and just give an
Yeah.
honest opinion.
Well, what I've seen now is even like some of the more popular YouTubers who like do give criticism on the industry and stuff. Now they're starting to get hit with articles from like the mainstream journalists and stuff that are saying like that they're just super negative. And like there's like this thing where if you're not super positive about anything that comes out anymore, then you're like just this negative piece of garbage. Like you can't criticize anything like that came from a big company because like you're just there to be negative and to like fire people up, and like when that's not the case, like you're just trying to give like your honest opinion. Like you're like, when did it not become okay to say that like a game is garbage if a game is garbage? Like it's totally allowed to be said.
Well, and we've talked about this before, Matt. You always bring up is that shit sells too, so that's why they're making the YouTube videos that are negative. The negativity, the criticism, the hard-hitting stuff, it sells. So that's why they're doing it. They're not in there like, we got the ponies here today. Bring on the ponies, boys.
Are you talking about Outer Ring?
Yeah. The racing ponies. No, I meant people like ponies. Positive thing.
People do like ponies. They are positive. Pretty negative feelings towards ponies, I guess.
But now I just totally ruined the podcast.
Yeah, we gotta scrap this whole episode.
For me, I think the big takeaway is like, as much as you want things to change, they're literally the only way they're going to change is if, one, people stop paying for subscriptions and paying for microtransactions. Two, if they come up with some other development that makes them more money. It's the only two ways it's going to stop. There's no other. There's just no other way it's going to stop.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you?
Unfortunately, I think you're. I mean, we're talking about all these ways, but it's just not plausible. Really.
And like it wasn't. You didn't have this issue back in the day, as we like to call it, because the subscription-based, microtransaction-based, DLC-based gaming model just wasn't a thing yet.
Right.
It just had, you know what I mean? Once it became a thing, like why would they ever go back? Like,
no, I mean,
just think about how much money they make off if you buy the game one time for $60 and then you're done with it. Whereas like if you get a free to play game and like it's just like it's almost even like it's like a mental thing where like, oh, if I pay $2 for the skin, it's fine if I do it. Then but you end up doing that like every week. And then you know what I mean? Then you end up spending more money. And like I think a lot of people fall into that trap.
Oh yeah.
What did we just say with Fortnite? What were the numbers? It was like 70% of all players had paid for skins and cosmetics, and it averaged out to like they had paid about $80 per person, and that over time was like 14.8 billion or something for Fortnite.
Yeah,
over less than 2 years of time
so like
without being in China.
Right, and if the game exists for longer, it's only going to keep going up. It's never going to get smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, we're part of it too. Think of how many skins we bought on League of Legends.
You're right.
You know what I mean? Think of how many fucking. I've even bought skins on Heroes of the Storm. I think like what a waste of money that was.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a difference because maybe there's not a difference. I mean, it's just a difference in my mindset. But like, I'll always try to support games that I like.
Yeah.
And that I think are good, especially if they're free to play. I will. Like a game like League. I mean, we had so much enjoyment on League for so many years. Like I will buy their stuff.
Yeah, but if we're saying, but Matt, if we're saying that model is wrong, think that that model is wrong, or is it just different, and can it coexist with the old model? That's the
It's a
thing.
really fine line, and I think I need to think through it more personally before I can even like begin to answer if I think that model is even okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
Because like I said,
no,
I like to support.
I'm the same.
I like to support the devs, but at the same time, like I understand that the more that model is introduced, well, it's already so introduced. I shouldn't say that. But every game's gonna have it eventually, and like once that happens, I mean, it's obviously a very, very big negative for like everybody involved except the companies that are gonna make the money.
Well, I mean, it'll really kind of suss out, who's like what good games are, though, right? I mean, it seems very unlikely that any of us would have spent any money at all on like League of Legends or HOTS if we weren't enjoying the game
Yeah.
to some extent. There's always those outliers like those whales that are just going to spend money on anything, and that's what a lot of these like free to play models kind of went after initially. Found that success, but if everything kind of moved to a free to play model, I feel like you'd see a lot of less polished games probably wouldn't do so well.
Yeah.
I don't
mean,
know. I don't know. I don't know about that.
People would still play them, but
Nah,
I mean, do you
I don't
think
know.
they'd recoup their
I could-
$20,
I'm not
$30
saying-
price tag?
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I could see that go either way.
I think with that model, it is harder to have success broadly across developers or big companies competing with each other. I think that it's more like we already see it with these juggernauts of Fortnite, League of Legends, Dota. I think that is how it works with those free to play models that are successful. Is like there's the king, the
But
God
it's not
King
like,
League of
But it's
Legends.
not like Apex and
Yes,
PUBG
yeah.
didn't make shit tons of money.
Yeah, there's some quick
Yeah,
cash
And
grabs, but nothing.
yeah.
It's not like PUBG's a good game.
Yeah, well, PUBG's timeline was a little bit different, and it was the first one, and yeah, I guess it still hangs on, it still makes money. Yeah, you're right. I just don't think that there's on the level that the big ones make money. I just
My-
don't think you're not
my
going to see
only
two.
fear-
Well,
my-
you're not going to see two battle royales making the same amount as. There's just not enough money to go
my
around.
fear. Here's my fear is that Adam, I think you're right. Like there is a chance that you would get less shitty games, but there's also a fear that once everything's like on a model like this, we're already kind of seeing this. Like look at what we just talked about with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I know that this is a game that's like this is single player with no microtransactions, so this is going to be kind of like a hard example to deal with. But this is what we talked about with like it having the Star Wars name. This game is going to be garbage, but it's going to make so much money. Just because it's Star Wars, it doesn't matter. It's the only Star Wars game on the market. And I think that like that's just going to keep happening over and over and over again. And I know it doesn't have the microtransaction model, and I'm sorry for using that as the example, but it's what came to mind. But like that's going to extrapolate over like decades of time.
I don't want to get into that too much, but yeah, I mean, you are right in one sense, but a lot of games aren't going to be able to replicate that because no one else can have, the Star Wars IP, and there really isn't.
Well, what we're trying
Anything
what
that
I'm trying to
compares
say
to
is
that,
like,
you
why
know?
the
Like,
fuck?
it doesn't
don't
matter
we
what they
come up
make.
with some new IP that's dope.
Right.
Like
I mean, like,
where's it
that
at?
Avengers game that's coming out from Square? I mean, give me a break.
Oh, does that look bad,
Game's
though?
gonna stink. But it's gonna make a shit ton of money.
Yep.
Was the one comment somebody made? It looked like they got all the stunt doubles from the movies to be the.
That was hilarious.
It's so true, though. It just feels so half-assed, and people are definitely gonna buy it. Definitely.
Well, I mean, and then our conversations are always like a full circle. Oh, guess why? Because it makes money.
I know.
And it's just easy, they have all the Marvel people, or the DC or Star Wars or Final Fantasy, or it's like just keep on pumping them out, boys. Get to work. Smack the developers on the butt.
I think like
Get to work. There's your deadline.
I think, like,
Have it
my-
done by the end of summer.
my final words, I guess, on this would be that like there are shining like glimmers of hope that we've talked about, like Project Red, and Larian's coming out with Baldur's Gate 3. Like those games are going to be good, And there's still developers like trying to give a really like a great quality product for a good price. And even like with The Witcher 3, Ben, like with the DLC like Blood and Wine, it's worth the money because it's just a ton of content and it's well made, and like that's fine. But it's when that stuff isn't quality and when you can tell that it's just that money grab. You know, the quality of the product isn't there, and it's something like Total War where you just have to buy this stuff to have like certain factions. It's like, what is this? But yeah, I guess I think it's just going to be about what the consumers want to pay for down the road. I think what we've all four of us have said, but yeah. I just hope that somebody's able to figure it out.
Yeah, and you know, before we leave this, I don't want to admit this, but Dave's right. You know, people are just going to keep buying the shit, and it's going to keep going the way it's going to go because that's how it works, unfortunately. I think the only chance that we have in order to, change this is to figure out ways to inform and communicate with people on a broad scale, and me and Wolf kind of were going over the avenue Twitch streamers and, Matt chimed in YouTubers and games journalism, just getting more honest and critical and stop being beholden to developers. Get fucking critical with these people when they do bad shit. And that's the only way, but it's very, very unlikely.
You would need investors to come in and provide very large lump sums of cash to start up giant media companies to combat the ones that already exist.
Yeah.
Well, the ones that exist are doing a really good job of dissolving themselves. So give them a little bit more time, and
but they still are the only games in town.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and the barriers to entry and those kind of things are just
it's
you just can't get through it. Like no person, you have to have somebody willing to just like toss up a lot of money.
It has to be like Elon Musk.
Yeah, you have to just have somebody that wants to like just cough up a lot of fucking money. Because there's no, you know what I mean? They have to be willing to just like give up money, and you have to be willing to lose money. That's all there is.
Yeah, that's fact. That's what I was thinking. I didn't want to have to say that because it's defeatist kind of thing. It's like you're gonna have to give up the money, and everyone.
Well, why don't we go after Elon? Why don't we go after Elon Musk and ask him to make a new video game console with us?
You guys want to raise some?
Elon Musk doesn't make that. You're talking about Sony and Microsoft. These motherfuckers.
Yeah, dude. He went into cars and he made fucking Tesla.
You wouldn't need a video game.
He's going into space.
You would just need all you really need is a big media company. Yeah, I don't think you even need a console to make change.
Oh, you just need
a media. You just need a media.
I'm just saying
to get the word out for people.
Yeah, you have to just have some pushback. Yeah,
right. For somebody like Elon, though, he likes making fun stuff.
Well, and he likes video games
with cars and.
Yeah, he's a big anime guy too. We got him.
Doesn't he? Well.
All right, Elon, if you're out there, man.
I'm sure he's listening.
If you're one of our 107 subs, pretty good chance.
All right, Elon, we'll be talking to you, man.
But let's jump down to this Vox Adpocalypse, because this is actually gonna loop in super well. I didn't know this was gonna happen, but like we talked about with, I think, the big games journalism and media companies pushing back on a lot of these YouTubers that are coming up and being negative or pushing back on some of these products that we've got in the gaming industry. I think that this also kind of happened in just like political media as well with this Vox Adpocalypse, and I know there's a lot to this, but if you haven't heard, I'm sure you have before, this all stemmed from the Steven Crowder and the Carlos Maza debate, and it all came down with some words that were said, I think on both sides, but it's caused YouTube to crack down even further on its policies surrounding what is hate speech and what's permissible on the site. And me personally, I mean, you guys can, I guess, say whatever you want, but just putting politics aside, I think the big issue here is just how we feel about these giant tech companies and platforms censoring and choosing what speech is acceptable and what is not. And me personally, I especially don't like the knee-jerk reaction of YouTube and other platforms where they get this complaint from a journalist or whoever, and all of a sudden they go in and like change all of their policies just based on like this one person giving pushback. And it just doesn't really make much sense to me as like a policy for a giant company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you said it. I mean, but it really isn't just one person. It's a giant
It's Vox
company or group of companies putting pressure on YouTube, to make these decisions. Regardless of what was said, I'm not sure that that YouTube, obviously you would want some amount of policing, I guess, but
No.
I'm not sure how much that is, and I feel like less is more in this case. The less restriction, the less policy enforcement, I guess, that less ambiguity. I should say, more clear cut rules on what's acceptable and what isn't, and less of this. Um, you know, it's case by case. We decide. We're God here. We decide who can stay and who can leave, who makes money here and who doesn't. On how we're feeling that, apparently that day, because one day they decide one thing and the next they're like, oh, well, obviously Fox and everybody got their nails into them and they said, well, we'll demonetize, this person for you. Does that make everybody feel better now about this situation?
Yeah.
Just kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than silly. It's incorrect. These are not the way that these companies should be handling these things. There's factions going against each other. Steven Crowder and political. It's conservative, and Carlos Maza, who is complete liberal. They, of course they're gonna have issues with each other. Like, the YouTube should ignore this shit. Like, this should not be an issue. Like, it's basically they have to choose a side, and that's not correct for a company that's trying to make money. We're talking about, like, everything that we were talking about earlier kind of goes in with this, because this is what's happening in the video game, and it's starting to be integrated into the video game industry as well. As it's like, pick your faction, like, and we know which faction it's gonna be.
Right. Well, then when we don't speak to, like, this is more politically charged, this whole thing, but, like, we don't speak to that, but we do, and we did speak about how, these big companies, not Vox in particular, but like the Kotakus of the world and stuff, are kind of, fighting back against the little guy on YouTube, that are kind of getting some traction with their, maybe
I
sometimes
gotta
negative.
push back on that a little bit. He's a little guy.
What's that?
Steven Crowder.
I mean,
I
yeah,
mean, in
but, in our case,
comparison to amount of money that Fox has, because they have people supporting them with political aims. But so does Steven Crowder. The main point that I'm trying to get at is, in the case of this particular debate that spurred on the Vox Adpocalypse, this shouldn't fucking be happening, in my opinion. And to anybody who's reasonable and wants things to be fair, YouTube, let people say whatever the fuck they want to say. Like, I don't get it. Like, keep everybody in plain sight. As long as people aren't posting videos where they're naked, or they're espousing violence on people, or
Yeah.
whatever.
That's
like,
my big question, Ben. It's
yeah.
like, why can't these big companies just rely on the First Amendment as like a shield for what can be said on their platform and what can't? And they don't have to decipher anything further than that. They just say, like, this is the Constitution of the United States. We're in the United States. We follow these policies. You can't, yell fire in a crowded theater, and you can't on Twitter, and you can't, and you can't, cause or incite violence towards an individual person or a company or something. You can't, say that you want to kill someone or something, or you want, like, a mob to go after somebody, and that's the line.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be hard to do that.
Yeah, it would not at all. It'd be the easiest route, in my opinion. But the thing is, are they trying to force people? And that's the whole big thing from the conservative or anybody on the right. is they're trying to force people because they know that this is the future. They're trying to control all the media because they want their people to get in office and their policies to go through and everything. But is that really happening? Or are these, I've heard you talk a lot about this, Matt, is like these companies are beholden to the money. So is there some way that if they choose this route that they're making more money somehow? Like, is that what's the big thing? Like
I
it
don't
doesn't seem
know. I
like it
mean,
would be to me,
I mean, yeah, usually I think that, yeah, I usually say it, but I mean, Dave's usually the one that says this too. It's just that, like, I think that when you like can't figure out why something is happening, it's usually financially related. But I don't know like who the investors are, or who owns shares of what companies. I have no idea.
Well, then there's also the theory that a lot of these people are, that are in the huge tech companies are just liberal minded and they have a bias. So of course they're going to go with Fox and Mazda and say, yeah, he's off, or yeah, he's going to make less money on our platform because we
Yeah.
don't like him.
Well,
There's that theory, and I don't necessarily believe in. I believe in I believe what Matt was saying. Let's just do it the bare minimum, First Amendment, real simple, like, but there are these theories out there,
well, the biggest issue is that they're like you know what I mean, like the media companies or the companies in control of their sites or whatever. They're not looking at it objectively. They're taking a side, and that's what the problem is because they're y- like they have a subjective view of the situation and they pick a side, which in their situation they shouldn't do that
Hmm.
because I think it's safe to say that with the publicity this is getting and like everybody knows about like what's happening in regards to like censorship and stuff on different social media platforms and websites, blah blah blah. There's there's going to be an issue where these big companies, like you know what I mean, Facebook, Twitter, blah blah, like they have like you know what I mean, they have like immunity. They're considered like a social platform, so they're
Mhm.
allowed to do whatever. And it's eventually gonna get to the point where like it's gonna go to the Supreme Court, and they're gonna say, hey, like you guys are no longer a protected platform because
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know what I mean. You're not.
Well,
And that's gonna cause some issues.
you're right. You're absolutely right. And like these companies just want to say that they're like private companies, and that, and to a certain extent, like, yeah, you're a private company and you can do what you want. But I would argue that a company like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, they have more influence on like politics and people's everyday lives than like the government does,
Oh yeah.
to a certain extent. So like they don't get to well, they do get to decide, but they shouldn't get to decide what should be like, what is like hate speech, or what should be on there and what shouldn't be on there. They're almost like, they should almost be like some sort of public utility, because they have too much influence over people at this point. There's too many
Yes.
users.
Yeah, and it's funny that we're talking about, the government ending up having to do something. I mean, well, the courts, the Supreme Court having to do something, because I think we're all in agreement. But that's like the last thing we want is the government making decisions
Well, I
on
think
this.
they have to. I
Yeah,
actually would
eventually.
want them to here, because I
I'm
don't know
just
what
saying
else. I don't know what else they
it's
can
kind of
do.
contradictory to what we usually are.
Yeah.
But it's startling, the discrepancies and the discrepancies of how these companies are handling these issues. They had said when this came out, and I don't, we're talking about this broadly. We don't want to like pinpoint the things, but I think it's important to, if people aren't familiar with this, they had put out initially that he didn't do anything to breach their
Terms of service.
terms and services or anything like that. Like if you say that and it's been reviewed and we know that you've taken a hard, you can't turn that back. What does that say about you when you turn that back? Like it's despicable, like you could maybe say, oh, we made a bad decision on that, and okay, but we can't revert it because we have to go by what we say. And when we make a statement like that, we have to go by it. You know, they can say that, but they can't take it back and then take his ads off. You know what I mean? Like it's pitiful in my opinion.
Right. I mean, they did clearly state that he didn't violate, what was it, like their community guidelines, something like that, that there was nothing there. They couldn't really do anything about it. And it should have just been like, slap them both on the wrist, like,
Yeah.
time out, children, like go to your corners for a little bit. Like you're having a public like pissing match between you two, and then you're going to get a bunch of, I don't know where you're going to get your company and the platform to try and back each side up. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
This whole thing is like really,
It's
really
despicable.
silly.
and it's gonna come down to like right now, you know what I mean? Right now they're protected. So like if a user like types like death threats and then they go shoot up a school or something, or people stumble upon, terrorist propaganda or blah blah blah, it's currently it's not their problem. Like they're
Yeah.
protected. Like they're
Mhm.
protected by they're not responsible for what users say on their platform, right?
Mhm.
But like if they're gonna keep making judgments
Yes.
and like taking sides and censoring people on like not fairly, it's gonna go to the Supreme Court, and then they're no longer gonna be protected, and then they're gonna run into some big time issues because they're not gonna be, you know what I mean? They're gonna be responsible for what people say on their platform.
Yeah, well, they better they better switch their fucking tactics and go straight to what we're talking, which is First Amendment, because the just bare minimum First Amendment shit, because they're gonna have more problems when not protected than they would have if
Exactly.
they're in their protected status. So it really doesn't make sense for them to continue down the route that they're
Right,
going. That
and at the end of the day, like, regardless of your political affiliations, you should always err on the side of free speech. Like, there's no reason like, if you actually care about
yes,
people's rights and whatnot, then you should always it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Even if it doesn't align even if your whatever view and the opposite viewpoint is being suppressed, you shouldn't want that as somebody that, like, wants free speech and wants equality. You shouldn't want that. That should still be against.
Right.
But
Unless
did
you
you
do
see
have
yeah,
a
this?
unless
Oh.
you do have a political agenda, and then if you do, then just come out and tell everybody. But don't like hide behind it and say that you're an open platform that anybody can say whatever they want on, because it's not
Right.
true.
yeah.
It's like false
And
advertising, actually.
one other thing that I wanted to say, which we can leave this because I don't want to get into too detailed of this, but really what it comes down to is like when you realize like people who were involved in this they were just using bad faith tactics, where it's like if you're supporting the Mazza part of it, Steven Crowder, whatever, he shouldn't have said what he said. I think he has the right to say what he said, but like morally, whatever, he shouldn't have said what he said. But the reaction and the persistence and the way that they went about it, and et cetera, et cetera, like you're trying. Somebody makes a living YouTube, and they are doing everything possible for them to not make that living anymore. And that's what it comes down to. It's like that's when I hear people. It's like similar to when I hear people at work, they're like, "Oh, they don't do anything. They should lose their fucking job." I'm like, "Well, no, they should get called the fuck out. They shouldn't lose their job." You know what I mean? Like they should be called out and like reprimanded. And if they continue to do it, strikes, whatever. Like, I'm going on a rant now, but it's just it's always like mind blowing to me when people are just like, they should just lose their job. It's like, fuck, man. Like, what if they got a family? You know what I mean? Like,
You know what's mind blowing to me? Did you
Hmm.
see at the end of that Newsweek article, they talk about Quentin Hoover?
Well, what they say?
He's apparently a YouTuber, over 300,000 subscribers. Quentin Reviews. I was looking at his channel. I'd never heard of him. So, he touches on Star Wars Galaxy, Disney parks, Garfield movies, Blue's Clues. That's
Oh,
his
he does it
recent.
all.
Blue's
That's
Clues,
his.
damn.
That's his recent stuff. But they got his take on this, and essentially, he's talking about like the success of extremist YouTubers like Crowder and stuff like that. But then, and then he gets into the law aspect of it. I thought it was funny. It was a quote. which he says there's nothing in any law which states that a private corporation has to allow any person a public platform to do or say anything.
Yeah, that's
So just
exactly
like
what I said. Yeah, right.
right.
It's
So I mean,
hilarious.
who is this guy? One, why am I taking Blue's Clues dude's opinion on Newsweek? But why do you need him to be like your little puppet
Yeah, I
to
don't know
say
what that
what you
is.
guys wanted to say? I don't. It's weird. I'm sure he's
Yeah.
fine, and nothing against him. I mean, I'm sure he's really entertaining. You have 300,000 subscribers. That's awesome. But why are you speaking to this? What does this have to do? This is not your expertise. I
Yeah,
would
well,
think.
Yeah, I mean, we could literally go on about because
Yeah, right, and-
this is something that's important to us because we're on the
Uh-huh.
platform and we have our own views and that like like we could say something silly or that we don't mean, and then before you know it, or at least at the minimum, the video is taken down.
We'll probably be gone as soon as we put this up.
Yeah,
Right, right.
just for me saying that.
Yeah, we're gone.
Dissenting
See,
thing.
we just dissipate. It's
Yeah,
like
I don't feel
we
so good.
we combust. Is that what is it? Spontaneous combustion.
Yeah,
There's people
yeah.
that just combust. It just happens to us.
Yeah, all four of us all at once.
We'll be
Let's-
like, never mind. All right.
let's jump down to this last story of the day here. So this was an article from gamesindustry.biz, which I usually really like their stuff. They have like a financial perspective on a lot of their articles. I like to go there for some material, but this one made no sense to me. So the article stated that only 17% of E3 games were non-violent that were showed. So they said of the 239 games featured at E3, only 41 can be considered non-violent. And how they did this, they deemed any violent action by and around the player to be violent, and they also included cartoon violence counted in this analysis. Like I said, I just think that this article was very useless. I think that it was like an attempt to prove the point that games are too violent, but there's no comparison to how violent games on the current market are, how violent they've been in the past, and there's also no ranking for how violent something is, like a Mortal Kombat versus a Super Smash Brothers, right? There are very varying tiers of violence here that are just not addressed. So I just don't know what this article was. Whoever wrote this, it's trash. But what I really wanted to bring this up for was that my argument is that isn't this mainly what video games were created for in the first place? Not to be violent, and not that there has to be violence. That's not my point, but it allows people to get out of the real world, live out their fantasies, and have a competitive spirit in the digital world, rather than having violence and letting some of their more maybe some of their aggression out in the real world. I mean, isn't that like the point of what this medium is?
Yeah.
Or am I off base here?
No, yeah, certainly.
You're right. I mean, look at John Wick. I mean that's just another form of media, and everybody eats that shit up. And I mean, it's violent. People. Not just per se because it is violent, but it's like entertaining. Where's the entertainment at? It happens to be maybe on the little more violent side. It's a little bit more. You could say it's more removed from your average. Your day-to-day life. Most people are like going out working 8 hours and coming home. It's not like John Wick's life or like something like Grand Theft Auto or like, people are getting like shot up and stealing stuff all the time in front of you. It's not terribly exciting. So, this is exciting. And if, what 83% of the games are violent and that's entertaining, like isn't that a good thing for us that we're just doing it on the internet or in the safety of your own home?
Well, I mean, this has kind of been debunked for me. I mean, yeah, what they try to say is that these games influence people to, do acts of violence and everything. It's like, no, the psychological condition of the person, that's the origin point for, their violence or their acts that they do that is not acceptable. These games, they may have a small influence, but like you have to get down to like the crux of the person's psychology, what's going on with them. I mean, it's the thing that I'm trying to say is it doesn't take normal people and make them violent or anything like that. It's been proven. I don't even know why people talk about this anymore. It's like,
I think not only has that been proven, I think it's actually like the flip side of the art. I think it's actually 180 degrees in the other direction. I would say that if somebody would have like a tendency or an urge to do something violent, then they could use video games as an outlet to do it there instead. I mean, that's what like sports are for. You know, so that you can be competitive and be aggressive in a format with roles and where it's safe. Right? That's what video games are.
Right, but then just to like not counterpoint you, but just to counterpoint the issue, like saying violence is an issue in video games. Okay, then why isn't violence an issue in movies or whatever
Right.
other form of media? Why is it only video games? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It just seems it seems like video games get targeted a lot lately with the gaming disorder and
Yeah.
fucking just
Mhm.
like
That is a good point. I mean, I just saw John Wick. Like, literally, Keanu Reeves is shooting people with a gun and throwing knives at them. But I mean, we all love him, and like, so does the gaming industry, apparently too. But like, that's an actual person
That's
killing
really
people.
interesting.
Wait,
Yeah, he
why
was
do
in
you
E3.
even? Right, right. Why do you even have to? It's not even what this article is saying, because I'm not sure. I do kind of want to bash on this guy. Apparently, he's the numbers guy at GameBiz. Like, all his articles are like,
Mm-hmm.
or GameIndustry.biz are like numbers based, but this is like sixth grade level shit.
What's the
Yeah, it's
analysis? That's what
stupid.
I'm
It's so
saying.
stupid.
There's no analysis. He just literally regurgitated the raw data from one
Yeah.
E3. He's not saying that like games are
What?
too violent, or he's not saying anything at all. It's just
Yeah, there's no depth to it. He's just a numbers man. He's just punches.
just literally
You can't
numbers.
expect him. You can't expect the numbers guy to.
He's the statistics boy.
he
You know?
just can't analyze them though. I mean, his other articles seem, I mean, slightly more in depth, but he's just not really making any points here. He does. They offhandedly get to it like, oh, you know, so and so did a good job because they didn't have very many violent titles this year. So like, he was applauding people for not being violent. I guess that's what they're, you know, what his angle is. But this is some like Bush League
There's just
kind of. Would you pay somebody? I mean, I've read the whole article. I mean, you just take a guess, like how much this guy got paid for, you know, video game journalist for something like this. Do you think he got paid to write this? It's insanity.
Has it always been like this, or is like what is up with this this new shit where I mean it's new to me where like no one follows any like rules or anything like that. They're just like no violence. We want more violence. No
Well, really,
sex.
all this
Like
was,
no bouncy boobies.
yeah, it's the
But
title. It's
don't objectify the women.
Yeah, it's the title. Yeah, it's the title.
it's
of
the
the
title
article.
of the article. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
what the hell
yeah.
else it says, but this implies that, you know, there's not enough nonviolent games, and that's all you need to know, because he's not going to tell you anything.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
crazy.
I think it also comes to, I think what I was saying a while ago is that the video game industry is so big that now everybody feels like they have to have like an opinion on what products are coming out. And I'm actually really worried about the future of games for the main topic that we discussed, with the products being watered down and like them taking financial advantage of a lot of the consumers. And it's probably going to keep happening to an even worse degree. But then you also have this stuff with like the mental illness, and you have, oh, like no sex, no violence, like nobody wants like any actual enjoyment in the games. So like, what do we get at the end? Like, what product are we gonna get in 10 years? Maybe just Animal Crossing, but then David.
I'm fine with that. I heard you guys talking. I heard McNeil ask if on the last podcast about Animal Crossing or Harvest Moon. I'd say Harvest Moon.
Wow.
Bitches.
What a stance.
But anyway, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to comment on what I was saying or not, and not to be like all doom and gloom, because we do try to stay positive, but like I really see like a lot of trends going in a direction that are not good for the consumer, at least not us.
You're totally right. Everything's trending towards like what's low effort and like catchy and buzzword. And like, look at Twitter. You can only have so many characters in there. It's not about like, I don't know, like we were saying before, like an informed decision or anything like that. It's just, I don't know, pushing out like a catchy game title, whether it's we were talking like Zelda or Final Fantasy or whatever, just whatever can grab people's attention and hold on to it long enough that you get that click or you get that dollar from them. Like that's all that matters right now, and it's definitely just going to keep going in that direction.
Yeah, I my stance on it is optimism, boys. Keep the positive energy flowing. I think that this is just going to be for a period of time. I think it may be for a long time, maybe our
100
life,
years, 200 years.
our lifetime, but eventually the truth will shine through.
Mm-hmm.
Honesty will envelop all of us, and we'll ride off into the sunset with our good stories and in-depth things.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be positive about it, obviously. I mean, I'd love for it to not happen. I'm just trying to be like a realist and just look at like the. I'm just trying to be like this games industry guy and just look at the data.
Anytime that I say like,
just look at the numbers, Ben. It's too violent.
Look at the
Spiel
numbers.
Matt comes back and he's like, "Shut up! I'm positive too. You know that."
Well, I just don't want to be too positive and overlook the issues.
Well, no, like I said, I just think that this is bad times. Going to be potentially even worse times, like you guys are talking about, and then we'll come back to reason.
Growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
The night is always darkest just before the dawn.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, let's wrap there. Yeah, that was good. I think that was a good conversation. I forget what we even said half the time. I was like really into it. But thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for listening as well. We really, really appreciate it. Leave us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you think. And check us out on iTunes, Spotify. We put the podcast there, and we're all on Twitter as well. And mainly we're on YouTube, where we put the podcast and also some of our other gaming videos. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you next week.